Cornish Mutual, farming insurance experts.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Farming Focus, the podcast for Southwest farmers, proudly brought to you by Cornish Mutual. I'm your host, Peter Green, and today we're diving into the topic of technology on farm. From online tools and precision equipment to data-driven insights and mobile apps, digital innovation is helping farmers make smarter decisions, save time, and run their businesses more efficiently than ever before. But how do we as farmers know what to invest in if we are in a position to invest? If you're anything like me, you might be thinking two things. Number one, how can I ever keep up with such a fast-changing area? Number two, I farm on a modest scale and fit the farming in around other jobs. Does tech on farm really apply to me? Joining me to address these and other questions on a truly wide-ranging subject are Matt Dobbs from Agsenze, a tech and data company specialising in the livestock sector, and Adam Short, who is Associate Director in Data Programmes at AHDB, the co-founder of two tech businesses, MA Systems Limited and Temple Technologies Limited, and also a farmer based in Devon. Together, we'll be talking about what's working, what's coming next, and how farmers across the Southwest can harness the tools available to improve productivity and sustainability. So whether you're tech savvy or just getting started, there's something for everyone in today's episode. Matt, Adam, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon.
It's great to have you both here. Matt, I'll start with you. Those people that are perhaps familiar with you will know that I gave a very abridged version of your CV in the introduction. So could you just give us a bit more of your own background and tell us a bit about Agsenze and the type of technology that you're developing for the livestock sector, please?
Absolutely. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Matt, and I am a dairy vet by training. And having had 25 years in veterinary practice, I've started to learn a little bit more about what is really needed to support livestock agriculture, both here in the UK and around the world. I had an early life in academia, working both in Australia, the US and the UK, but most of my life was in practicing veterinary practice, and I'm no more comfortable than standing at the backside of a cow talking about her health and her welfare. And so when I left veterinary practice some 7 years ago, I really wanted to engage in a career that was focused on how we could support the health, welfare, production, and help mitigate the carbon impact of livestock agriculture. And I could see the changing nature of veterinary practice, and more importantly, could see the opportunity to bring a bigger benefit to the sector by working with and encouraging farmers to adopt technology. So I founded Agsenze, which is focused on remotely monitoring livestock populations. So we focus on using digital cameras, both two-dimensional and three-dimensional cameras, and microphones. And effectively, we become the eyes and the ears of a very good stock person by looking at and listening to the animals and understanding what they tell us using those images and those sound files. And so because we have these technologies in place, because they're remote to the animal, they're not affecting that animal's behavior, we can start to observe and listen to these animals much more frequently than even a human or even the best stock person might be able to. And now we can start to tell you some real detailed insight as to how these animals are performing, how healthy they are, and most importantly, judging their production, performance, fertility, and ultimately trying to make farming more efficient, both from a cost point of view and an environmental point of view.
Fascinating. So it's not just about a health and welfare piece, which is obviously, really, really important, but it's also about efficiency and productivity. That's really fascinating. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about it as our conversation continues. Thank you. So Adam, we've heard a little bit about Matt and his sort of mix of roles. Coming to you, you've got quite the mix going on as well. Tech founder, data lead, AHDB, farmer. How do those roles influence your view of what farming technology really needs?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me. It has been a really weird process of coming to this point in agriculture. probably the subject of an entire podcast in itself. In fact, it was at one point. What I quite like is in coming at most things from what we might term the new entrant point of view, which I find quite useful. Just as a bit of context, I'm sort of almost 25 years as a jobbing IT person, really. Delivering IT mostly on a consultancy basis for big organizations, enterprises, so Home Office, IBM, MOD, those sorts of places. But almost for the same amount of time, having half a foot in agriculture somehow. And that all started in the depths of Wales and on some hill farms where I got taught about sheep farming, whether I liked it or not. And that was all desperately interesting, but really, really sparked my passion for the industry.
So that's where you were brought up?
It was not. No, I was 20 years old
Oh, right.
when that all kicked off. It actually happened at university. Had to do a year in industry, and I ended up meeting some people in Wales that found out I'd never been on a farm before that point, and they thought that was great sport and that I should do lots of stuff on the farm. And it didn't take long for me to be convinced. But yeah, I'm a sheep and goat man at heart, and that's largely their fault. So yeah, I continued working in IT for IT's sake, if you like. Lots of that big enterprise delivery stuff for most of that time. And it was really about 6-7 years ago where I really wanted to try and merge the two worlds, the interest in agriculture, the small farming concern I got here in Devon, which came about 10 years ago. It's only 30 acres, but what is a farmer and all of that stuff? Profitable enterprises. So I'll stand my ground there. And I wanted to try and merge that world with the IT skill set that I'd already got. There'd been a couple of startups along the way, but that's when MA Systems came into the fore, and I was doing lots of exciting stuff with the analysis of breeding records for pedigree livestock, looking at genetic diversity primarily. Got super interested in that, still am interested in that. And I think, some of that exposure, getting involved with some of the wider industry stuff, so Oxford Farming Conference, those sorts of things, their Inspire program really, opened my eyes to areas in the industry I wasn't aware of before. And that all led to my current role in AHDB as Associate Director of Data Programs, where I'm really focused on the external facing elements of data. So it's not so much about the data that AHDB holds and processes, it's about what are we doing as an industry, what are we doing for farmers in the area of data, and how can we pull the industry together around some really big and clever solutions.
If I had to push you, Adam, on what one tech tool or system is particularly useful or valuable for farmers, maybe on the arable side in particular, what would you say that might be?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I'm really tempted to start with one that doesn't quite exist yet, but the one that I'm most focused on working on. Do you think I'll get away with that?
Try it.
Doesn't it quite exist yet? So there's a press release went out a couple of weeks ago. So this is actually my first opportunity to talk about the flagship project in my area, AHDB, which is the Farm Data Exchange. Bit of a Ron Seal name, but essentially it doesn't matter what sector you're in agriculture, you're having to provide tons and tons of data at the moment in quite a disjointed, disconnected way to lots of commercial players, who've all got their data governance in place, and but there is often that concern about what happens to the data, what's the onward use of that data once it's aggregated, anonymized, all that sort of stuff, and it's costing a lot of money and everybody's time. So what we're trying to do is really streamline that data sharing across the industry, and put farmers in control of the data sharing permissions, so that the position now where if you're selling into two different supply chains, you're going to have to do two different carbon calculations for that contract, possibly using two different tools, could be two different consultants coming down the farm driveway. It's absolutely bonkers. We're trying to move away from that position to a point where actually recognizing that most of this data already exists in separate places around the industry, joining those separate data stores up and letting the farmer choose where they share that data. And we think that's going to be pretty game-changing as a tool. We're just at the proof of concept stage at the moment, but that's due to finish by about February next year. And then hopefully onward to big and bright things.
Fantastic. So thank you very much for that, Adam. Could you just remind us what the name was that we need to be listening out for?
Yeah, sure. So it's the Farm Data Exchange.
The Farm Data Exchange. Wow.
Yeah, and
Watch
if
this
you
space.
Google that, you'll hopefully find a press release.
So, Matt, Adam's spoken there about the fact that farmers feel quite often that they are producing lots and lots of data returns to various different bodies. I guess my follow-up to that response would be: is that something that your experience bears out? And we've heard about a potential way of dealing with that. How and where do you think that might be particularly useful to livestock farmers, perhaps in particular?
Yeah, I'm going to completely agree with Adam that what the industry needs is some form of consolidated data platform. There's nothing more frustrating than for a producer or for veterinarians or other advisors and consultants to farmers having to go to multiple sources to try and find and then extract the piece of data that they need. I'll raise just the consolidation, though, to make sure that it's also actionable data. It's completely academic if you're capturing information that you as a producer can't do anything about it. And so for me, the most exciting area here is actually a tool that I believe will be able to do both of these things in a very short term, and that is AI. Not avian influenza, not artificial insemination, but artificial intelligence, because I believe that this is now, for the first time, going to be able to help consolidate data sets that may exist in many different silos on individual farms. But importantly, it's going to be able to interrogate other data sources and create, using large language models, actionable insights for producers and talk to them in the language that they know and understand. So for me, this is a really exciting area.
So I want to dig more into this, but before we go on any further, Matt, could you just unpack something that you just said? You talked about a large language model. A lot of people that are listening may not know what that is, please.
Yeah, it's simply a way of engaging with technology in a normal human voice. And in the same way that we're communicating with each other now, I believe that AI and using large language models is going to be able to interact with the end user in a manner that they need to. No longer are we going to need to be writing lots of code and script simply to be able to engage with what the data is telling us. We should be able to simply speak to our phone, or maybe it will speak to us without prompting and help us to understand what we should be doing to help managing our farms and our crops better.
Okay. And so just digging a little bit more into the AI piece, I think some people who are listening might be wondering exactly what it is that AI could do. So on the platforms that are our farms and our businesses, how could AI take the data? We've already sort of touched on data a little bit and make it usable information. As you said at the beginning, I had a former teacher who used to quote Clifford Stoll, who said, "Data is not information, information is not knowledge, knowledge is not understanding, and understanding is not wisdom." And his voice would crescendo as he reached the end of that sentence. But I mean, this alludes to the fact that information is data with context, and knowledge involves understanding the relationship. So how can AI help with doing that?
Absolutely. Your teacher was obviously wise. I would further extend that to it's the doing that's important. A well-known trainer manufacturer has a slogan, "Just do it." And that's ultimately what I want to try and achieve from everything that we're talking about with our technology. So whether these technologies are remotely monitoring animal systems or whether there are extended data sets associated with existing technologies on farms, farm management systems, milking parlors, feeding systems, AI is going to be able to assimilate all that data to go and speak to the various data systems, often without the need for you to go and create additional linkages because they already exist through anything that is already connected to the internet. And it's going to be able to go and interrogate that data, understand, for example, that an individual dairy cow may have a freeze brand number, a line number, an ear tag number, an official identification number, and it's going to be able to go and interrogate that and work out that all of those are one and the same Daisy the cow, and that her data then, depending on where whoever has captured the input data for that cow, is going to be able to generate an outcome for that animal, which will then lead quite quickly to a preventative or a supportive measure to enhance that animal's health, welfare, or productivity.
That's really helpful. Thank you. So if I may sort of flesh this out with an example, and feel free to sort of put me right or anything like that. For example, there might be a monitoring system which is detecting dairy cow temperatures in the shed. It sees a cow that's perhaps running at a slightly higher temperature. Maybe it's got movement sensors and that cow is not moving in a way that it would expect to see. It can then speak to, let's say, a separation gate after the milking robot, which takes that cow after it's been milked and puts it in a separate pen. And let's say there's also another interface with the farmer's phone, which texts him to say that cow 91 is in the isolation pen, that her temperature's a bit high, and that actually you might want to just check her over in case she needs something. Is that a sort of chain of events that we could see happening?
That's exactly the sort of chain of events that you may see happening. And dare I say it, using your example, it may go even further than the example you've just explained. So, for example, an animal that is running a temperature may be running a temperature because she's sick. So maybe the AI could then go and interrogate other databases to try and predict what that cause of disease may be. Did she have a high cell count? Could she be suffering from mastitis? Have we got a database of previous laboratory results which might indicate that she's had respiratory disease or any other type of illness? But further than that, another reason why a cow runs a temperature is because she might be in estrus, on heat. And so again, we might be able to interrogate the other technologies like a wearable technology or a vision-based technology, which is understanding estrus on that farm. So furthermore than just separating that cow and saying, go and observe her, we think there might be something wrong, I'm anticipating that the AI is going to be then guiding the producer to what actually is wrong with that animal, or right in the case of it being in estrus, and even further then going on and recommending what to do with that animal, what the course of treatment might be, right the way down to when that animal may be inseminated and, for example, with which bull they may need to be inseminated with. It really is going to be that detailed to bring precision level of agriculture.
Incredible. And I guess in all likelihood, it may well be doing that slightly before even the most experienced stock person may have noticed some of those signs, because they're so subtle, because it's round the clock monitoring. And therefore, hopefully we're addressing any issues, whether with a positive intervention like artificial insemination or with some remedial work on a veterinary side. And therefore productivity takes less of a dip and we're getting a better result for the whole system, the whole business. Wow. Okay. Lots to get our head around there. Adam, I'm going to come to you now. We've talked about one scenario, but there's lots on the market. If we are a farm, as many, probably most are, with potentially limited resources financially, certainly time, and perhaps even in terms of skills and appetite for going down the route of increased technology, where do we start? How do we work out what can be of the greatest help for us and can really help us to take our businesses forward?
It's a really good question. I think it probably comes back to, I think, something that Isaac, a colleague of mine, said on a previous episode with you. He talked about spending a bit more time working on the farm, not in the farm, on the business, not in the business. I think it comes back to that. I think you've got to start from a point of view that you're clear about what you're trying to achieve. It would be really easy to say what farmers need to do to get a handle on what's out there, what the potential is they just need to get out more, and I think that was probably the way that I was tempted to answer this originally. Go to conferences, go to shows and meet other farmers, look to other countries. I mean, that's definitely in there, but that's very, very solution first focused. You've got to know why you're doing it. Is this sort of a Kaizen situation? Are you just trying to, say we want to get 10% of our time back from a farm, and that's our mission. Ourselves to be more efficient in that way. We want to produce things 10% more cheaply. If you've got those things laid out, you can start looking at where the possibilities are. Then you can go looking at the solution. It's exactly the same in an IT delivery. In wearing my other hat, you have to start with the requirements before you go out. Otherwise, the solution is going to take you down a road that perhaps you didn't necessarily want to go down, and you spent an awful lot of money on tech, and you weren't clear about the outcome that you wanted to get from that. And it sort of ties into what Matt was saying, but being very clear about the outcomes here, being very clear about what's actionable. To a certain extent as well, you've got to think about what data you would need to gather in order to enable the change that you're trying to affect in the farming business with the technology. So, do you have the data that would be actionable when you invest in that tech? And you need quite a lot of data. There are very few of these solutions that will start giving you results from day one because you bought a shiny piece of kit. You need some historic data. You probably, a baseline is really useful. We talk about that a lot these days, don't we? We could think about something really, really dull like antimicrobial use in livestock. You can record what you're doing now. That's great. How do you know how good that is? Unless you've got some baseline to compare that against, unless you've got some historic data to compare that against, you don't really know.
Cornish Mutual, farming insurance experts.
For many farmers, they're going to be wondering, well, in terms of the actual quantum of the investment, how should they be deciding where to go first? Is it the return on the investment that should be helping them to make decisions? Is it ease of use and training or skills? Is it the simplicity of the integration with existing processes? Or is it a bit of all of the above? Matt, what would your thoughts be on that?
So it would be nice to demonstrate a return on investment with every piece of technology. I spent my life as a veterinary surgeon trying to persuade farmers to adopt vaccination programs and parasite control programs, all based on returns of investment. And as one farmer said to me once, if I accepted your calculations of return on investment on every one of these, I would have retired as a multimillionaire many years ago. So we have to be careful about how those return on investments are calculated. I think for many producers nowadays, it's about an investment around labour saving. First and foremost, how is this technology going to reduce my reliance on labour? We know the challenges that the industry has in bringing in new skilled labour. I actually believe that the adoption of greater amount of technology on farm is going to engender a new generation wanting to get involved with farming that realise that it's as much as these days as about the technology as it may be about a pitchfork. That definitely is one of the ways that I think that we should be looking at this for the future.
Okay, that's really interesting. So we're talking there about labour. Adam, I'll come to you now. Earlier, Matt talked about just do it. So in that context, we were talking about getting on with adoption and making sure that our adoption of technology can help us to achieve other things in our business. But we haven't talked that much about skills. I think people quite often worry that AI is going to usurp jobs, and we've heard a little bit about how AI can help. But if someone is listening and wants to learn more about how to use and manage tech and increase their skills, Adam, where would they go?
That's a really good question. Yeah, it's come up in a lot of the forums in the last couple of years. It gets talked about in places like Oxford Farming Conference. I think the organisation TIA, they've obviously been set up in the last few years. They're looking closely at this, so that's probably the first port of call for me, would be to reach out to TIA and to talk about where they are with their recommendations and their access for all of these new bits of training, these new elements, the skill sets they can see becoming important. I mean, coming right back to something Matt said early on about what AI can do for us, there is no developer, no IT developer I know who doesn't use AI to do most of the bulk of their coding work. AI will smash out 30,000 lines of code, and then the skilled developer has to go through and just correct it, right? So you can't entirely take the human out, as you can't with a pitchfork example. We're really heading down a road where quote unquote normal people would be able to do this elements of this programming, elements of the scripting work in the same way as if you think back to my formative years in the late 90s and early noughties, it was only the IT nerds who could create websites, right? Now everybody within internet access can create websites. There's no reason to think we're not going the same way with applications, on a much wider footing. So, a farmer wants to do something quite bespoke with some, again, to Matt's previous points, of future-proof tech that they've invested in, but the functionality is not there. But let's say it's API enabled. Sorry for a bit of tech jargon there, but unavoidable sometimes. That's great. They can tell their AI tool that they want to talk to that API. They want to essentially call up on the phone the camera that they have in their barn, and they want to get some different information out of it. And they want to integrate that with something else. For those who don't know, API or application programming interface, super, super nerdy. But think of it as the telephone or fax machine on the end of a remote system. That's how system to system communication works in tech these days. So, hopefully, almost any tech you would buy these days would be API enabled, meaning you stick it in, you can talk to it remotely, and you can pull from it.
So, for example, are we saying that in a few years' time, if I've got a weigh cell which my cattle are walking across every day, let's say when they walk to a trough, and I want to know what the daily live weight gains on my calves are whilst they're on their mothers to make sure we're hitting targets, I could just go into an AI system and say, I've got this weigh cell whose API address or whatever it might be is this, and please let it talk to my phone whose phone number, for example, for want of a better phrase, is this. Can you please come up with an app to do that? Is that something that might be possible in sort of 5 years' time?
Exactly that. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to do it with Copilot in Microsoft Teams, for example, but, it has to be a slightly more sophisticated and purpose-built AI tool for that. But yes, literally, go and get this data from my weigh scale and store it in this place.
Love it.
And you can then tell it to do something else with it, separately create a dashboard and publish it on my website so that all of my customers can see what I'm doing and get that real engagement with your customer base.
I could see this being something that eats rather a lot of time. Just to reference the first part of your last answer there, you talked about TIA. So that's the Institute for Agriculture and Horticulture, a really interesting body. Their website, tiah.org, is well worth taking a look at for anyone who's interested. Just one thing I wanted to come back to. We talked a little bit about data and Adam, you particularly talked about what you're working on with AHDB on that front, the Farm Data Exchange. But there'll be some people saying, I'm not sure that I want to be giving my data away. People are going to have some misapprehensions around the use of farm data. What would you say to that, Adam?
Yeah, they do. It's something that we saw over and over again we sort of done about 12 months of discovery ahead of embarking on this work. But trust, transparency, and control triumvirate came up every single time we spoke to somebody about this. So it is very serious. I mean, the very boring answer to a lot of this is data governance, and nothing turns people off in a conversation quicker than talking about data governance. But essentially, the entire point of that is to get the data to where it can be used, and that's kind of. I think we need a bit of a mindset shift in farming around the data that is being gathered is only useful if it can be used. Just amassing weight data or pedigree records or whatever it is on farm, some of that is useful, but it's not massively useful. It's not massively insightful. It comes back to the comparison example that I gave earlier, comparing yourself to a baseline. Equally, comparing yourself to national data sets, contributing to those national data sets is really important. So I think we need farmers to understand that the value of the data they're collecting on farm has some value to them, certainly. It doesn't have as much value to them or to the industry as a whole as data that is shared and pooled and analysed. And that is to the benefit of everybody. And what we're really focused on is putting farmers in control of that process, which I think is a key element. I think that's been missing. There are other conversations about realizing the value of that and using that to enable some of the data sharing. I think that can be a bit of a misnomer. We've accidentally headed down a track where I think in some corners of the industry, a farmer might think, well, I'm not giving my data over unless you give me £100, and it's not going to work like that. Anybody promising you £100 for your data has other things in mind for it. That's not a good deal. What you want is real actionable, sustainable value out of that data.
I think it reminds me a little bit of conversations that we've had on the podcast in the past around circle of influence and circle of interest. It's a slightly different thing, but it reminds me in the sense that there's data, there's information which is interesting, but there's data which is really usable and useful, and that's the stuff that we need to be concentrating on and making sure that we're using that and we're sharing that responsibly and sensibly. Matt, I'll come to you. There's lots going on. I mean, that's evident from our conversation. Could you just maybe give us a couple of ideas of some agri-tech trends that you think people could really use to their benefit in the Southwest? And also, I'm aware that on Tuesday, the 23rd of September at the Science Museum in London, there's going to be an event based on artificial intelligence in the livestock sector called AI Live. So are we going to hear more about the sort of things that can impact on livestock farmers at that event?
Yeah, absolutely. This sector is changing very, very quickly. The opportunity for new technologies and particularly AI, they reckon that the ability of AI doubles every 3 months. So that is an astronomical pace of development into our sector. And so it really is incumbent on all of us in the industry, particularly those people with leadership positions, to be able to encourage the industry to engage and to start to ensure that the data and the technologies deliver what they want. Quite rightly, I often get told by farmers, I don't want a technology that's applicable for a Californian feedlot dairy or an extended grazer in New Zealand. I want a technology that supports me and my farm here in Southwest Devon or wherever it may be. So it's really important that we do, both as a community of users and producers, farmers, but also the community of those of us that are supporting and developing these new technologies, to work together to ensure that they are applicable for the future. My big belief is that remote technologies are going to certainly have a stronger position in the intensive sectors, pig and poultry. Remotely monitoring the animal, remotely monitoring the environment really is the mainstay of good, efficient farming. And that's now starting to play out also in the ruminant sector. And that's really where the exciting plays start. For me, absolutely, I mentioned at the start, AI is going to be crucial to this, and I want the industry to engage with this, however ethereal it may feel at the moment in terms of its application on farm. But there are farmers that are already using AI of their own volition, not just because it's part of a technological solution that they have adopted. So I would love to see more of the industry, including producers, join us on the 23rd of September at AI Live, which is being held at the Science Museum, where they'll get to hear from a variety of speakers about not just the understanding of what AI is going to do for farming and the opportunity that brings, but how it can be applied, real world examples where farmers are already using the technology, whether it's around labour saving, whether it's around production improvement. And then most importantly, and we've touched on it quite a few times today, how should the governance in this sector to develop? I personally believe it should not be a top-down approach with government or any individual industry body telling us how the governance should work. For it to really flourish, it needs to be a collaborative approach right the way across the industry, especially if we're going to compete on a global scale where the governance of AI may be more liberal in other parts of the world.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So that's the event is AI Live on the 23rd of September at the Science Museum in London. Do search for that and make sure that you get your tickets and get along there if you're able. It's really interesting to hear the way that AI feels like it's going to move forward in ag is for us to engage, whether that's something which is in our comfort zone or not. Engaging is the way that we're going to take it forward, and it's the way that's going to help it to evolve in a way which is going to benefit all of us. Brilliant. So my final question to both of you gents, what's one piece of advice that you give to a farmer who's looking to take their business forward using tech? Adam, I'll come to you first and then over to you, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to split this down the middle, if I might. I think there's sort of a strategic answer to this, and there's the very practical, individualistic answer. From a strategic level, it'd be really useful if farmers were giving some really clear steers to some of the industry bodies, so the likes of ourselves at AHDB, NFU, those sorts of bodies, that they do want some direction, around certain areas. They do want those organisations to take a strategic stance at certain elements, around certain elements of the data piece, the tech piece. That would be really useful. Practical individual farmer, it's so tricky because it is quite sector specific. I was just talking to the beef and lamb sector. I'd probably say we're still at the point where we need better adoption of the basics. Find out how you're going to invest in some farm management software. and get the basics of the data sorted. Start gathering your data. You've got to look at your business and see how you're going to justify that. Be really clear about what you want the outcomes to be. But that's probably where we are for a lot of beef and lamb farmers. Not all of them by any stretch, but a lot of them. I'd say dairy is much further along that road. Pork really closely integrated, so further along. Arable, I try really hard not to talk too much about arable farming because I've got zero experience with arable farming. But things like, backing the digital grain passport project, that would be a really cool thing to do as well.
Fantastic. So clean and organized data to begin. We talk a lot about baselining in all sorts of different conversations on the Farming Focus podcast, and it's coming up again. Matt, that same question to you. Just one piece of advice for farmers looking to take their first steps forward in tech.
Absolutely. So while we might have given the impression that we're talking about a technological revolution about to hit agriculture, really this is about marginal gains, and farmers are going to improve their health, welfare, production and mitigate carbon, not by making whole-scale changes, but by adopting technology to give them that marginal gain. So for me, farmers need to, first of all, stay informed about what is possible, what is the art of the opportunity, adopt early. So don't be frightened, get involved and look at what these technologies might be able to do for you and take that brave step of investing in them, ensuring that there is a cost benefit, and then realize that gain and use that to be able to further invest into your farming system so that technology becomes embedded in the way that you farm, not just a nice to have on top.
Cornish Mutual, farming insurance experts.
It's time now for this week's showstoppers. It strikes me that throughout today's conversations, we've been talking about the interaction between tech and people. The first thing that comes to mind is around the skills that are needed to use tech. It can be scary thinking about taking on new things, but actually we've heard from Matt that these technological changes can be quite small. We've all got technology in our pocket in the shape of a mobile phone, and actually just making small incremental changes, perhaps using a different app for measuring out paddocks on our farm, can be a step forward. Secondly, there's a concern that technology and bringing on technology onto farm can lose jobs and can make people redundant. And again, we heard that doesn't need to be the case. Far from it, and quite the opposite. It might be the thing that brings new people onto our farms with new ideas and new skills. And actually, by using technology, we might be able to get rid of those jobs that cause us friction or the things that we enjoy less, and can help us to focus on the higher value adding jobs. So finally, how do we make the most of this? How do we exploit technology to its best? Well, we need to stay informed. We heard about being early adopters. And again, it can be scary, but we can really exploit these marginal gains by taking on small bits of technology to drive our businesses forward. So the summary is, be bold. Just do it.
Cornish Mutual, farming insurance experts.
What an episode it's been. A huge thank you to my guests today, Matt Dobbs and Adam Short. Join us next week for a bonus episode when we'll be looking at how to get started when it comes to using tech to your advantage on the farm. We would love to hear from you with any feedback, with questions or suggestions for the podcast. So send us an email on podcast@cornishmutual.co.uk. Check out the show notes for more information on today's episode, including the link to our podcast disclaimer. You've been listening to Farming Focus, brought to you by Cornish Mutual. I've been Peter Green, and until next time, it's goodbye from me and everyone in the Cornish Mutual podcast team.
Cornish Mutual, farming insurance experts.